So honey, since Lee is in a caloot, and Christopher is in New York, we're going to call him to send Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn to the United Arab Emirates.
That's a good idea, since today is Canada Day.
Good evening, this is Christopher speaking. Who is this?
Good evening, Christopher. This is Keisha Gravely.
And this is Tayshawn Gravely. We are calling to tell you, because Mr. Brooklyn, known as Mai's father, just got Brian in trouble, and Mrs. Nichol, known as the mother of Chloe, Sophia and Zizzy, just turned off the TV with on air, so we would like you to send them to Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, please.
I'm sorry, but they're going to stay in Canada. Besides, they have the right to do that, because Brian woke the kids up with thunder, rain and wind by using the TV and on air 3 nights ago.
Excuse us, Christopher, but this is serious. First, leave the United States and return to Canada. Second, send Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn to the United Arab Emirates. Third, leave Dubai and return to Canada. Finally, leave Canada and return to the United States. Okay.
Excuse me, but I don't think I can do that. Besides, Dubai is way too hot for Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn, so I'm afraid they can't go.
We don't care about that. Seriously, Christopher, we are not gonna repeat this again. First, leave the United States and return to Canada. Second, send Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn to the United Arab Emirates. Third, leave Dubai and return to Canada. Finally, leave Canada and return to the United States. Okay.
Please, Keisha and Tayshawn, it's almost 6:30, so I have to stay here for at least a few minutes.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Christopher, how many times do we have to tell you? We're not joking around, and we are not kidding. First, leave the United States and return to Canada. Second, send Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn to the United Arab Emirates. Third, leave Dubai and return to Canada. Finally, leave Canada and return to the United States. Okay.
Alright, Keisha and Tayshawn, this is getting on my nerves now. I am not going to send them to Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and that's final.
For the last time, Christopher, they are going to Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, because he got Brian in trouble and she turned off the TV with on air. So,
Keisha and Tayshawn, don't start with this again. Christopher is not going to send Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn to Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and that's the end of it.
I agree with my brother.
we beg your pardon, but we are almost done talking to Christopher. So please let us finish.
My wife and I have to agree with that. Like they said, Dubai's way too hot for Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn, so they can't go. Besides, they did the right thing by getting Brian in trouble and turning off the TV with on air, cause he woke the kids up with thunder, rain and wind by using them 3 nights ago. So, leave Christopher alone.
And like we told your kids before, we are almost done talking to Christopher. So the reason why you have to let us finish is because Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn need to get punished.
Yeah. So no, we're not going to leave him alone until—
We don't ever want to hear about it. Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn are staying in Canada, and that's the end of it. So,
don't even think about hanging up on us.
Wow! I can't believe it happened again.
We understand that, Carl. This is ridiculous.
So I'm afraid I am going to have to call the police to arrest Christopher, because he refused to listen to Mr. and Mrs. Gravely after they told him to send Mrs. Nichol and Mr. Brooklyn to Dubai, the United Arab Emirates.
Fantastic idea, Miss Trunchbull. Stop right there. Christopher, you are under arrest for refusing to listen to Mr. and Mrs. Gravely after they told you to send Mr. Brooklyn, known as the father of Mai, and Mrs. Nichol, known as the mother of Chloe, Sophia and Zizzy, to Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you. To the police car we go. It's jail time for you, which is until Independence Day.
excuse me, officers, but there is no way Christopher is going to get arrested.
We're sorry, but we just received a call from Miss Trunchbull and she said Christopher refused to listen to Mr. and Mrs. Gravely after they told him to send Mr. Brooklyn, known as Mai's father, and Mrs. Nichol, known as the mother of Chloe, Sophia and Zizzy, to Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. Now if you don't mind, we have to take him to jail.